70% of transformation projects fail not from bad strategy, but because leaders couldn't distinguish which battles not to fight. Strategic mastery isn't about what you do, it's about what you don't do. This is the essence of adaptive leadership. It's not about having one rigid plan, it's about understanding when to pivot, when to refuse, when to say this is not the battle we should fight. So when circumstances change, you pivot instantly, not because you're indecisive, but because you're prepared. Think about a chess grandmaster. They don't look at one move, they look at variations. If I move here, he'll move there, then I'll move here. They're not indecisive. They're thoroughly prepared for multiple scenarios. He's saying when you fail as a leader, the cause will surely be found among these five. Not market conditions, not competition, not bad luck, your personality faults. Because here's the truth, the world doesn't need more people who know Sun Tzu's wisdom. It needs people who live it. Will you be one of them? 70% of transformation projects fail not from bad strategy, but because leaders couldn't distinguish which battles not to fight. Harvard Business Review shows 89% of executives fall into one of the 5 dangerous faults that destroyed ancient generals 2,500 years ago. The same traps are destroying modern careers today. What if a military strategist from ancient China identified the exact leadership traps you're falling into right now? What if he gave you a precise map not of what to do, but of what you must never do? 5 specific roads you must not follow. 5 fatal flaws that will destroy your leadership. In the next 60 minutes, you'll master Sun Tzu's Chapter 8, Variation in Tactics, also known as the 9 Changes. You'll learn 3 game-changing frameworks. The Do Not Do framework, knowing which battles to avoid. The 5 fatal flaws diagnostic, identifying your blind spots. The tactical flexibility system, adapting strategy without losing direction. This isn't about being indecisive. It's about being strategically selective. Welcome to the art of knowing what not to do. Let me ask you something. When you think of great strategy, what comes to mind? Aggressive expansion, bold moves, decisive action? Sun Tzu would say, you're thinking about it backwards. Chapter 8 of The Art of War. Variation in tactics teaches us something counterintuitive. True, strategic mastery isn't about what you do, it's about what you don't do. Listen to this profound statement from Sun Tzu, Chapter 8, verse 3. There are roads which must not be followed, armies which must not be attacked, towns which must not be besieged, positions which must not be contested, commands of the sovereign which must not be obeyed. Did you catch that last one? Commands which must not be obeyed. Sun Tzu is telling generals, and by extension, modern leaders, that sometimes you must refuse orders. You must refuse to take certain roads, fight certain battles, contest certain positions. This is the essence of adaptive leadership. It's not about having one rigid plan. It's about understanding when to pivot, when to refuse, when to say this is not the battle we should fight. Here's why this matters today. InnoSight research shows S&P 500 company lifespan has collapsed. In 1965, the average company lasted 33 years. By 2020, just 21 years. By 2027, they predict it'll be only 12 years. Why are companies dying 3 times faster? Because they're fighting the wrong battles. They're taking roads they shouldn't follow. They're contesting positions they should abandon. Think about it. Blockbuster fought Netflix head-on in the wrong market, at the wrong time. Nokia fought Apple and smartphones without the right ecosystem. Kodak invented digital photography, but refused to abandon film. All of them ignored Sun Tzu's warning from Chapter 8, verse 3. There are roads which must not be followed. Today's core theme is adaptive. Leadership, the ability to pivot strategy and tactics based on evolving circumstances. But here's the twist. It's not about being wishy-washy or indecisive. Sun Tzu says in Chapter 8, verse 4, the general who thoroughly understands the advantages that accompany variation of tactics knows how to handle his troops. Notice the word thoroughly understands. This isn't random pivoting. This is systematic strategic flexibility. You need to understand when to change, what to change, and equally important, what to never touch. But here's the harsh reality. Most leaders struggle with adaptation. And it's not because they don't want to change. It's because they fall into what I call the 5 adaptation traps. These aren't new problems. Sun Tzu identified them 2,500 years ago in Chapter 8, verse 12. He called them the 5 dangerous faults. But before we dive into those, let me show you how these ancient traps manifest in modern business. Trap 1 is sunk cost blindness, the inability to abandon failing investments. Think about Blockbuster in 2000. They had 9,000 stores worldwide. Netflix approached them with a partnership offer. Blockbuster CEO John Antioco dismissed Netflix as a very small niche business. Why? Because Blockbuster had invested billions in retail infrastructure. They couldn't imagine abandoning those stores. Those were their roads, their fortresses, their positions. Sun Tzu would say they violated chapter 8, verse 3. They followed a road that must not be followed. They contested a position, physical retail, that was already lost. Result? By 2010, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy, while Netflix grew to a $240 billion empire. Trap 2 is analysis paralysis, waiting for perfect information that never comes. Harvard Business Review found that 89% of decision makers fall into at least 3 cognitive biases when facing change. They want more data, more analysis, more certainty before they act. But Sun Tzu teaches us in chapter 8, verse 9, if, on the other hand, in the midst of difficulties, we are always ready to seize an advantage, we may extricate ourselves from misfortune. Notice the phrase, in the midst of difficulties. You don't wait for difficulties to pass. You act within them. You seize advantages while others are still analyzing. Here's what these traps cost you. PMI, the Project Management Institute, found that organizations waste 11.4% of their investment due to poor decision-making. That's $109 million for every $1 billion invested. But it's not just money. Gallup's 2023 research shows only 23% of employees are engaged at work. Why? Because they see their leaders making the same mistakes, repeatedly following roads that should not be followed, fighting battles that should not be fought. The core problem isn't lack of strategy. It's lack of strategic flexibility. Most organizations have a plan, but they don't have a system for knowing when to abandon that plan. Sun Tzu addresses this directly in chapter 8, verse 6. So, the student of war, who is unversed in the art of varying his plans, even though he be acquainted with the 5 advantages, will fail to make the best use of his men. You can know all the advantages, market size, competitive position, resource availability, but if you can't vary your plans based on changing circumstances, you'll fail. So what's the solution? How do we develop this strategic flexibility? How do we know which roads not to follow, which battles not to fight? That's where Sun Tzu's chapter 8 becomes revolutionary. It's not just philosophy, it's a practical system. And it starts with understanding one crucial concept. Here's the concept that changes everything. Sun Tzu says in chapter 8, verse 7, hence in the wise leader's plans, considerations of advantage and of disadvantage will be blended together. Most leaders see advantages or disadvantages. There are either optimists who see only opportunities or pessimists who see only threats. Sun Tzu says both approaches are wrong. The wise leader blends them. You look at advantages and disadvantages simultaneously. You see the full picture, not just the comfortable parts. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. 1982, Johnson & Johnson faces a crisis. 7 people die from cyanide-laced Tylenol capsules. Tylenol is J&J's flagship product, 31% of their profits. CEO James Burke faces a choice. Most advisors say, do a limited recall, minimize costs. The problem is only in Chicago, don't alarm the whole country. But Burke applies Sun Tzu's principle. He blends advantages and disadvantages. Advantages of limited recall, save $100 million immediately. Avoid panic. Protect market share in the short term. Disadvantages, lose customer trust forever. Face potential lawsuits. Damage the J&J brand built over decades. Burke sees the blended picture. He recalls 31 million bottles nationwide. The cost, over $100 million immediately. Market share crashes from 37% to 7%. But here's what happened. Within months, Tylenol recovered completely. J&J became the gold standard for crisis management. Their stock price recovered and exceeded previous levels. Why? Because Burke understood Sun Tzu's teaching. He didn't just look at immediate advantages. He didn't just look at immediate disadvantages. He blended them. He saw short-term pain would create long-term trust. McKinsey research validates this. Companies with high strategic flexibility achieve 47% higher ROI than rigid competitors. This is the foundation of the 9 changes framework. Every decision requires you to ask, 1. What are the immediate advantages? 2. What are the hidden disadvantages? 3. What are the immediate disadvantages? 4. What are the hidden advantages? 5. How do these blend together over time? Sun Tzu continues in chapter 8, verse 8. If our expectation of advantage be tempered in this way, we may succeed in accomplishing the essential part of our schemes. Notice the tempered. Your optimism about advantages must be tempered by awareness of disadvantages. Your pessimism about disadvantages must be tempered by awareness of hidden advantages. Let me make this practical. Think about a decision you're facing right now. Maybe it's a new project, a career move, a strategic initiative. Most people make a simple pros and cons list. That's not what Sun Tzu teaches. He teaches blending, seeing how advantages create disadvantages, and disadvantages create advantages. For example, rapid expansion is an advantage, you gain market share, but it's also a disadvantage, you stretch resources thin and lose quality control. These aren't separate issues. They're blended. The advantage contains the disadvantage. Now I know what you're thinking. Wait, if I'm constantly considering advantages and disadvantages, won't I become paralyzed? Won't I overthink everything? This is the most common objection to strategic flexibility. People say, if I'm always questioning our strategy, always looking at disadvantages, how will I ever commit to action? How will I inspire my team? Great question. And Sun Tzu anticipated this exact concern. Here's the answer from chapter 8, verse 4-5. The general who thoroughly understands the advantages that accompany variation of tactics knows how to handle his troops. The general who does not understand these may be well acquainted with the configuration of the country, yet he will not be able to turn his knowledge to practical account. Sun Tzu is saying understanding variation isn't about being wishy-washy. It's about being thoroughly prepared. You understand variations before you need them. You've already thought through alternative scenarios. So when circumstances change, you pivot instantly, not because you're indecisive, but because you're prepared. Think about a chess grandmaster. They don't look at one move. They look at variations. If I move here, he'll move there, then I'll move here. They're not indecisive. They're thoroughly prepared for multiple scenarios. Research supports this. Proshi's change management studies show 60% of employees resist strategic changes. Why? Because leaders present changes as random pivots. We're going in a completely new direction, but when leaders present changes as pre-planned, variations. We always knew we might need to adjust based on XYZ. Resistance drops dramatically. Spotify is a perfect example. They use what they call the squad model. Each squad has a consistent strategic vision, but tactically they pivot every 2 weeks based on data. Result, with 8,000 employees, they maintain 85% engagement scores. Why? Because people understand the vision is stable. The tactics vary. That's not chaos, that's intelligent adaptation. Here's the key distinction Sun Tzu makes. There are 3 levels. 1, strategic direction. This rarely changes. Your mission, your core values, your ultimate goal. 2, tactical approach. This varies constantly based on circumstances. How you achieve the strategic direction. 3, operational execution. This must be stable and systematic. The day-to-day systems that make tactics work. Most failed transformations confuse these levels. They change strategic direction every quarter, or they keep tactics rigid when circumstances demand change. Sun Tzu's 9 changes refers to tactical variations within a stable strategic framework. But here's where it gets practical. How do you actually implement this? How do you build a system for tactical variation without creating chaos? Sun Tzu gives us a clue in chapter 8, verse 10. Reduce the hostile chiefs by inflicting damage on them and make trouble for them, and keep them constantly engaged. Hold out specious allurements and make them rush to any given point. Now, in ancient warfare, this meant keeping enemies off balance. Through constant tactical variations, they couldn't predict your next move because you were systematically unpredictable. In modern business, this translates to keep your competition reacting to you, rather than you reacting to them. How? Through systematic variation. Amazon is the master of this. While everyone watched their retail business, they built AWS in stealth mode. While everyone copied their retail tactics, they pivoted to AI and logistics. Jeff Bezos' day one philosophy means never let the market predict your next move. Result, Amazon has maintained an average 28% annual growth rate. For over 20 years, they deploy code updates every 11.6 seconds. Their competitors can't keep up because Amazon varies tactics faster than competitors can copy them. But here's the crucial insight. Before you can vary tactics effectively, you must first know what not to do. This is the foundation of chapter 8. Sun Tzu says in verse 1, 3, and this is one of the most important passages in the entire art of war. There are roads which must not be followed, armies which must not be attacked, towns which must not be besieged, positions which must not be contested, commands of the sovereign which must not be obeyed. 5 specific prohibitions, 5 categories of what not to do. Let's break these down one by one, because this is where ancient wisdom becomes immediately practical. Before we dive into the 5 prohibitions, let me tell you a story that perfectly illustrates what Sun Tzu means. 1987, a young Chinese engineer applies for a U.S. visa to pursue better tech opportunities. He's bright, ambitious, determined. But the visa officer says rejected. He applies again, rejected. A third time, rejected again. 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, 8. Times 8, crushing rejections that would break most people's spirits. This is Eric Yuan, and his story is about to become a masterclass in Sun Tzu's 9 changes, the art of finding alternative roads when the main road is blocked. But Yuan understood something profound. In chapter 8, verse 9, Sun Tzu says, "If on the other hand, in the midst of difficulties, we are always ready to seize an advantage, we may extricate ourselves from misfortune." Notice the phrase, "in the midst of difficulties." Not after difficulties pass, not when circumstances improve. In the midst, right in the middle of rejection and failure. Each visa rejection taught Yuan something about persistence, about timing, about finding alternative paths. He didn't give up on the destination. He varied his approach. Finally, on the 9th attempt, success 1997, Yuan joins WebEx in the United States. But here's where the real 9 changes story begins. Yuan spends 8 years at WebEx. But he's not just working, he's studying. He's identifying what Sun Tzu would call the market void, the gap between what customers need and what existing solutions provide. The void Yuan identified? Reliability. Video conferencing existed, but it was clunky. It crashed frequently. It frustrated users. Competitors were adding features, screen sharing, recording, chat, but they were missing the fundamental issue, reliability. This is a perfect example of Sun Tzu's teaching in chapter 8, verse 3. There are armies which must not be attacked. Yuan realized, don't attack competitors on features. That's an army you must not attack. You can't out-feature Cisco and Microsoft. They have unlimited resources. Instead, attack the void the space competitors aren't defending. Make video work flawlessly every single time. One thing done perfectly. In 2011, Yuan leaves WebEx to start Zoom. For years, steady but quiet growth. The company is profitable but not spectacular. Yuan is patient. He's building reliability into every pixel, every millisecond of latency. And then 2020 happens. COVID-19 hits. Suddenly, the world needs reliable video communication. Zoom was perfectly positioned. They weren't lucky. They were ready. Daily users exploded from 10 million in December 2019 to over 300 million by April 2020, a 30-fold increase in 4 months. Revenue soared from 623 million in FY 2020 to 2.65 billion in FY 2021, a 326% growth in 1 year. But here's what most people miss. This wasn't luck. This was the result of Yuan's understanding of Sun Tzu's chapter 8, verse 11. The art of war teaches us to rely not on the likelihood of the enemy's not coming, but on our own readiness to receive him, not on the chance of his not attacking, but rather on the fact that we have made our position unassailable. Yuan didn't rely on the likelihood that video demand wouldn't spike. He made Zoom's position unassailable through preparation. 9 years of building reliability into every line of code. When the world changed overnight, Zoom was ready. Yuan's story teaches us that the 9 changes isn't about grand strategic shifts. It's about daily discipline. Identifying what not to attack, don't compete on features. Identifying what to build reliability as an unassailable position. Preparing your position before circumstances demand it. Sun Tzu says in chapter 8, verse 9, if, on the other hand, in the midst of difficulties, we are always ready to seize an advantage, we may extricate ourselves from misfortune. Yuan was always ready. 8 visa rejections taught him to be ready. 8 years at WebEx taught him to be ready. 9 years building Zoom taught him to be ready. When COVID hit, he didn't need to scramble. He seized the advantage because his position was already unassailable. Now let's dive deep into Sun Tzu's most practical teaching from chapter 8. The 5 prohibitions, 5 categories of what you must not do. Again, chapter 8, verse 3. There are roads which must not be followed, armies which must not be attacked, towns which must not be besieged, positions which must not be contested, commands of the sovereign which must not be obeyed. For the next 15 minutes, we'll examine each prohibition with modern business examples. These aren't abstract philosophies. These are specific, actionable principles that separate strategic masters from tactical amateurs. First prohibition. There are roads which must not be followed. In ancient warfare, this meant literal roads, paths through mountains, routes through enemy territory. Some roads led to ambush points. Some roads stretched supply lines too thin. Some roads took you away from your strategic objective. The wise general knew not every path that's available should be taken. In modern business, roads are markets, strategies, business models. Just because a road exists doesn't mean you should follow it. Perfect example, Southwest Airlines in the road. Not followed the hub and spoke model. In the 1970s, every major airline followed the same road. Hub and spoke networks fly passengers to major hubs like Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, then connect them to final destinations. This was the road in the airline industry. But Southwest founders looked at this road and said, this is a road which must not be followed. Why? Because that road led to expensive airport fees at major hubs, complex scheduling with high connection times, vulnerable to cascading delays, brutal competition from established carriers with more resources. Sun Tzu would say that's a road that leads to a battle you cannot win. Don't follow it. Instead, Southwest chose a different road. Entirely point-to-point routes between secondary airports. Dallas Love Field instead of DFW. Chicago Midway instead of O'Hare. Oakland instead of San Francisco. This road looked inferior. Smaller airports, less prestige, fewer connection opportunities. But it had strategic advantages. Lower airport fees by 40–60%. Faster turnaround times 10 minutes versus industry average 35 minutes. No competition from major carriers. Simpler operations with single aircraft type Boeing 737. The results, 47 consecutive years of profitability. While competitors filed for bankruptcy repeatedly, United, American, Delta all went through Chapter 1. 11 Southwest remained profitable every single year. Current market cap over $20 billion, industry-leading profit margins. This is the power of knowing which roads must not be followed. The obvious road hub and spoke was the wrong road. The less obvious road point-to-point secondary markets was the right road. Sun Tzu's wisdom from 2,500 years ago applied to modern aviation. Now apply this to your own situation. What roads are you being pressured to follow? Simply because everyone else is following them? In your career, are you pursuing a prestigious job that everyone wants, even though it doesn't align with your strengths? In your business, are you entering a crowded market just because it's large, even though you'll face entrenched competitors with more resources? In your personal development, are you following a path that looks impressive to others, but doesn't serve your actual goals? Sun Tzu would ask, is this a road that must not be followed? Second, prohibition. There are positions which must not be contested. In warfare, this means literal ground hilltops, fortresses, strategic points. Some positions are so well defended by the enemy that contesting them would cost more than they're worth. The wise general recognizes some battles aren't worth fighting, even if you might win them. In modern business, positions are market segments, competitive battlegrounds, mindshare categories. Classic example, Nintendo Wii versus PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. 2006, Sony and Microsoft are locked in brutal competition for the hardcore gamer position. Who has better graphics, more processing power, superior online capabilities? These companies are spending billions competing for the same position. Sony's PS3 launches at $599, they're losing $240 on every console sold. Betting, they'll make it up in game sales. Nintendo looks at this battlefield and makes a Sun Tzu decision. This is a position which must not be contested. Why? Because Sony and Microsoft have deeper pockets. They can sustain losses longer. They have established relationships with hardcore game developers. The position is too well defended. Instead, Nintendo creates an entirely new position. Family gaming with motion controls. The Wii isn't trying to have better graphics. It's not competing on processing power. It's creating a position that Sony and Microsoft aren't defending. Casual gaming for families. Grandma can play Wii bowling. Little kids can play Wii tennis. Non-gamers can participate. The graphics are worse. The processing power is weaker. By traditional metrics, Nintendo is losing. But by Sun Tzu's metrics, Nintendo is winning. They're not contesting a position defended by giants. They're creating undefended territory. Final sales figures. Diswapen Australia make him certain. Nintendo Wii, 1.6 million units. PlayStation 3, 87.4 million units. Xbox 360, 84 million units. Nintendo wins the generation. By refusing to contest the hardcore gamer position, they profit while Sony loses billions on the PS3 in early years. This is Chapter 8, Verse 3 in action. There are positions which must not be contested. How do you identify positions not to contest? Ask 3 questions. 1. Resource asymmetry. Does the enemy have more resources to defend this position? Then you have to attack it? 2. Defensibility. Is this position naturally defensible due to network effects, brand loyalty, or switching costs? 3. Opportunity cost. Even if you could win this position, would the resources required prevent you from creating better positions elsewhere? If you answer yes to 2 or more, Sun Tzu would say, don't contest this position. 3rd prohibition, and this is the most controversial, there are commands of the sovereign which must not be obeyed. Sun Tzu is telling generals, sometimes you must refuse orders from your king, your emperor, your CEO. This sounds like insubordination. It sounds dangerous, but Sun Tzu is making a crucial distinction. The person giving orders doesn't always understand battlefield conditions. They're removed from the situation. Their information is outdated. The wise general knows strategic objectives come from leadership. Tactical execution requires battlefield autonomy. Powerful example, Intel in the 1980s. Intel's primary business is memory chips. That's their identity, their revenue source, their reason for existing. Company chairman Gordon Moore strongly favors staying in memory. But CEO Andy Grove sees the battlefield changing. Japanese competitors are flooding the market with cheaper, better memory chips. Intel is losing money quarter after quarter in memory. Grove faces a choice: obey the implicit command to stay in memory, the company's heritage, or refuse that command and exit memory entirely. Grove asks his famous question to Intel president, if we got kicked out and the board brought in a new CEO, what do you think he would do? The answer: he would get us out of memory. Grove responds, why shouldn't you and I walk out the door, come back, and do it ourselves? This is Sun Tzu's teaching manifested. Grove doesn't literally disobey an order, but he refuses to follow the implicit command, the organizational momentum, the historical identity, the chairman's preference. He exits memory completely, pivots Intel to microprocessors. The result? Intel becomes the dominant microprocessor company for decades. Stock price increases over 2,000 in the next 10 years. The company that almost died in memory becomes the foundation of the PC revolution. If Grove had obeyed the implicit command to stay in memory, Intel would have died. Sun Tzu isn't advocating chaos or insubordination. He's teaching battlefield autonomy within strategic alignment. When should you refuse a command? 3 criteria. 1. Information asymmetry. You have battlefield information that leadership doesn't have. 2. Changed circumstances. The command was based on conditions that no longer exist. 3. Strategic misalignment. Obeying the command would violate the larger strategic objective. If all 3 criteria are met, Sun Tzu says you must refuse the command. Respectfully, strategically, but firmly. 4th prohibition. There are armies which must not be attacked. In warfare, this means enemy forces that are too strong, too well-positioned, or too prepared. Attacking them would lead to defeat even if you have a larger force overall. In business, armies are competitors, market leaders, entrenched players. Some competitors are so strong in their domains that attacking them directly is suicide. Remember Eric Yuan in Zoom? This prohibition explains his entire strategy. When Yuan started Zoom in 2011, the armies in video conferencing were formidable. Cisco WebEx market leader, billions in resources. Microsoft Skype Teams unlimited resources, Windows integration. Google Hangouts free integrated with Gmail. These are armies that must not be attacked, at least not on their terms. Yen doesn't try to compete on features, price, or distribution. Those are the army's strong points. Attacking there would be suicide. Instead, Yuan identifies the undefended flank reliability and user experience. Cisco focused on enterprise features. Microsoft focused on integration. Google focused on free access. Nobody focused on just working perfectly every single time. Yuan doesn't attack the armies where they're strong. He attacks where they're not defending the reliability flank. By the time COVID hits and reliability becomes the only thing that matters, Zoom has built an unassailable position there. In your context, who are the armies that must not be attacked? The competitors so strong that competing directly would drain your resources? Apple and smartphones, Google and search, Amazon and e-commerce? Sun Tzu would say, don't attack them where they're strong. Find where they're not defending. That's where you build your position. 5th prohibition. There are towns which must not be besieged. In ancient warfare, sieges were resource intensive. Surrounding a fortified town, cutting off supplies, waiting for a surrender. This could take months or years. Sun Tzu says some sieges cost more than the town is worth. The wise general bypasses fortified towns, isolates them strategically, and achieves objectives without the siege. In modern terms, towns are entrenched positions, defended markets, fortified customers. Sometimes fighting for them costs more than they're worth. Think about companies that besiege, customers with aggressive retention tactics, endless discount offers, threatening to close accounts, guilt-tripping about loyalty. This is besieging a town trying to force customers to stay through siege tactics. But Sun Tzu would ask, is this siege worth it? The cost of the siege discounts, retention teams, negative brand impact might exceed the value of keeping that customer. Sometimes the wise strategy is let them go. Invest those resources in acquiring new customers who actually want to be there. Here's the broader lesson from all 5 prohibitions. Sun Tzu isn't teaching defeat. He's teaching strategic selectivity. Chapter 8 is called Variation in Tactics, but the foundation of tactical variation is knowing what not to vary. What you must refuse to do. Most strategic failures come from doing too much, fighting too many battles, following too many roads, contesting too many positions, besieging too many towns. Sun Tzu teaches strategic mastery begins with strategic refusal. Now we see how it all fits together. Chapter 8 started with blending advantages and disadvantages. Why? Because knowing what not to do requires sophisticated judgment. You can't just avoid everything hard. You must understand which disadvantages are acceptable, following the right hard road, which disadvantages are fatal, following a road that must not be followed. This is the blended thinking Sun Tzu teaches in verse 7, considerations of advantage and of disadvantage will be blended together. We've covered the 5 prohibitions, what not to do. We've seen Eric Yuan's story of tactical variation. We've examined companies that succeeded by refusing to fight certain battles. But now we need to address the deeper question, what makes this so difficult? Why do smart leaders consistently violate these principles? The answer lies in what Sun Tzu identified 2,500 years ago as the 5 dangerous faults, the personality flaws that destroy generals and leaders. After teaching us what not to do, Sun Tzu now teaches us why we do it anyway. Why we follow roads we shouldn't follow. Why we contest positions we shouldn't contest. It's not lack of intelligence. It's not lack of information. It's personality flaws, deep-seated tendencies that cloud our judgment. Sun Tzu says in chapter 8, verse 12, and this is one of the most psychologically sophisticated passages in ancient literature, there are 5 dangerous faults which may affect a general. In the next section, we'll examine each fault in detail. We'll see how they manifest in modern leaders. And most importantly, we'll learn how to diagnose them in ourselves before they destroy us. Chapter 8, verse 12, Sun Tzu says, there are 5 dangerous faults which may affect a general. 1, recklessness, which leads to destruction. 2, cowardice, which leads to capture. 3, a hasty temper, which can be provoked by insults. 4, a delicacy of honor, which is sensitive to shame. 5, over-solicitude for his men, which exposes him to worry and trouble. These aren't just ancient military observations. They're timeless psychological patterns. Harvard Business Review found that 89% of executives exhibit at least one of these faults in their decision-making. What makes this teaching profound is Sun Tzu's precision. He doesn't say these are bad qualities. He says each fault leads to a specific outcome. Recklessness leads to destruction. Cowardice leads to capture. Each has its own pattern of failure. Here's why this matters. We just learned what not to do, the 5 prohibitions, but knowing what not to do isn't enough. You need to understand why you'll violate your own wisdom. These 5 faults are the psychological mechanisms that make smart people do stupid things. They're the reason brilliant leaders follow roads they shouldn't follow, contest positions they shouldn't contest. Let's examine each fault with modern examples. As we go through these, I want you to do something uncomfortable. Identify which fault describes you, because until you see your own pattern, you can't fix it. First fault, recklessness, which leads to destruction. Sun Tzu isn't talking about boldness or courage. He's talking about action without calculation, movement without preparation, growth without foundation. The reckless leader says, we need to move fast. Analysis paralysis is killing us. Just execute. There's truth in this, speed matters. But recklessness confuses speed with lack of preparation. It mistakes urgency for importance. Perfect modern example, Wells Fargo, 2016. CEO John Stump sets aggressive cross-selling targets. Every customer should have 8 different Wells Fargo products. 8. The goal itself isn't reckless. The recklessness is in the execution, no ethical guardrails. Massive pressure on branch employees. No system to verify genuine customer need. Result, employees create 3.5 million unauthorized accounts. Customers are charged for products they never requested. The fraud goes on for years. When discovered, $3 billion in fines. 40% stock price drop. CEO forced to resign. Permanent brand damage. This is what Sun Tzu means: recklessness leads to destruction. Not just failure, destruction. The company survives but is fundamentally damaged. The reckless fault isn't about taking risks. It's about taking risks without establishing safety systems, ethical boundaries, or verification mechanisms. How do you know if you have the reckless fault? 3 symptoms. 1. You pride yourself on speed. I'm a person of action. I don't overthink things. Ready, fire, aim. 2. You dismiss people who raise concerns. You're being too cautious. That's analysis paralysis. We need to move now. 3. You have a pattern of quick wins, followed by devastating losses. You succeed at first, then the foundation crumbles. If you recognize 2 or more symptoms, you have the reckless fault. Sun Tzu's Solution, Chapter 8, Verse 11. The art of war teaches us to rely not on the likelihood of the enemy's not coming, but on our own readiness to receive him. Make your position unassailable before you move fast. Preparation before execution. Foundation before growth. Second fault, cowardice, which leads to capture. This is the opposite of recklessness. The cowardly leader overthinks every move. They see risks everywhere. They're paralyzed by fear of failure. Sun Tzu says cowardice doesn't lead to destruction like recklessness. It leads to capture. You become a prisoner of circumstances, trapped by your own inaction. Perfect example, Yahoo, 1998-2012. Yahoo was the internet company. In 1998, they had 60% of the search market. They had the traffic, the brand, the resources. 1998, Google's founders approach Yahoo, offering to sell their search algorithm for $1 million. Yahoo says no, too risky. We're doing fine. 2002, Google is growing. Yahoo could still buy them for $3 billion. Yahoo says no, too expensive. 2006, Facebook is exploding. Yahoo offers $1 billion to buy Facebook. Zuckerberg says yes. Yahoo, board gets cold feet and lowers the offer. Deal falls apart. Result? Today, Yahoo's search market share is under 3%. Google dominates. Facebook is worth over $900 billion. Yahoo sold its core business to Verizon for $448 billion, a fraction of its peak value. $125 billion in market value. Evaporated because leadership was afraid to make bold moves. They could see the opportunities. They understood the threats, but they couldn't act. This is cowardice leading to capture. Yahoo became a prisoner of its own fear. They didn't fail through bad decisions, they failed through no decisions. How do you know if you have the cowardice fault? 3 symptoms. 1. You constantly seek more information. Let's do another study. We need more data. It's too early to decide. 2. You can articulate risks better than opportunities. Ask you about a decision, and you immediately list 17 things that could go wrong. 3. You have a pattern of watching opportunities pass. You see them. You understand them. But by the time you act, someone else has captured them. If this describes you, Sun Tzu's solution is in Chapter 8, Verse 9. If, on the other hand, in the midst of difficulties, we are always ready to seize an advantage, we may extricate ourselves from misfortune. When notice in the midst of difficulties, you don't wait for clarity, you act with incomplete information, balancing advantages and disadvantages as taught in Verse 7. We've reached the midpoint, the insight that reframes everything. After examining recklessness and cowardice, you might think, Sun Tzu wants you to find a balance between them. Be neither too bold nor too cautious. Find the middle path. But that's not what Chapter 8 teaches. Look at what comes before the 5 faults. Verse 4, the general who thoroughly understands the advantages that accompany variation of tactics, knows how to handle his troops. The solution isn't balance. It's adaptability. Sometimes you need to be bold. Sometimes you need to be cautious. The wise leader knows which moment requires which approach. This is the revolutionary insight. Adaptability itself is your greatest competitive advantage, not your product, not your market position, not your resources. Your ability to change course when the ground shifts beneath you. Microsoft under Satya Nadella proves this perfectly. When Nadella became CEO in 2014, Microsoft was stuck. They'd missed mobile. Their culture was rigid know-it-all rather than learn-it-all. Market value $300 billion, stagnant for a decade. Nadella didn't just change strategy. He changed Microsoft's relationship with change itself. He reduced decision-making layers from 8 to 4. He established a rule: strategic decisions within 72 hours, tactical decisions within 24 hours. Most importantly, he made adaptability a cultural value. Learn it all over know it all. Embrace cloud even though it cannibalized existing business. Partner with Linux even though they'd been sworn enemies. Result? Microsoft's market value grew from $300 billion to over $3.1 trillion, more than 10x growth in a decade. Boston Consulting Group research validates this. They created an adaptability index, measuring how quickly companies respond to market changes. Finding a single 1-point increase in adaptability. Index correlates with 23% higher shareholder value over 5 years. Not 23% in one exceptional year. 23% compound over 5 years. Adaptability isn't just about surviving crises. It's about sustained competitive advantage. This is what Sun Tzu meant in chapter 8, verse 4. Understanding variation of tactics isn't a nice-to-have skill. It's the skill that determines who handles their troops, their resources, teams, opportunities effectively. Third fault A, hasty temper, which can be provoked by insults. This is different from recklessness. Recklessness is consistent lack of preparation. Hasty temper is emotional. Reactivity, making decisions based on feelings rather than strategy. Sun Tzu specifically says, which can be provoked by insults. The hasty-tempered leader is controllable by enemies. All they need to do is provoke you, and you'll make emotional decisions. Modern example: United Airlines, April 2017. Flight 3411 from Chicago to Louisville is overbooked. United needs 4 seats for crew members. They offer compensation for volunteers. No one volunteers. United's protocol: randomly select passengers to remove. Dr. David Dow is selected. He's a doctor who needs to see patients the next morning. He refuses to leave. Here's where hasty temper takes over. Instead of de-escalating, United staff calls security. Officers drag Dr. Dow off the plane. His face is bloodied. Other passengers record everything on their phones. Within hours, the video is viral worldwide. United's CEO initially defends the decision: re-accommodate this customer, which inflames the situation further. Result: United stock drops $1 billion in market value in one day. The CEO is forced to apologize repeatedly. United's brand suffers permanent damage. What happened? At every escalation point, United staff made emotional decisions. They felt insulted by Dr. Dow's refusal. They felt their authority was challenged. So they reacted with force rather than strategy. Sun Tzu says hasty temper can be provoked. This is dangerous because it means your enemies can control you. They just need to provoke your emotions and you'll destroy yourself. In this case, Dr. Dow didn't even mean to provoke United, but their hasty-tempered response turned a routine overbooking into a global PR disaster. How do you know if you have the hasty temper fault? 3 symptoms. Iritonam. 1. You make different decisions when angry calm. You would handle it differently, but in the moment, emotion takes over. 2. People can predict your reactions. Your team knows how to push your buttons to get certain outcomes. 3. You regret decisions made in emotional states. Later, you think, why did I do that? But in the moment, it felt right. If this describes you, Sun Tzu's solution is in chapter 8, verse 7. Considerations of advantage and of disadvantage will be blended together. Force yourself to see advantages and disadvantages before reacting. This creates a pause between provocation and response. 4th fault, a delicacy of honor, which is sensitive to shame. This is subtle. It's not about having honor that's good. It's about being so sensitive to perceived shame that you make irrational decisions to protect your image. The honor-delicate leader cares more about looking good than being effective. They'll double down on failing strategies rather than admit error. They'll hide problems rather than solve them. Devastating example: Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes. Holmes founded Theranos claiming revolutionary blood testing technology. 1 drop of blood could run hundreds of tests. Investors poured in billions. Theranos was valued at $9 billion. Problem? The technology didn't work. But Holmes's delicacy of honor wouldn't let her admit it. When scientists raised concerns internally, Holmes fired them. When journalists investigated, she threatened lawsuits. When the FDA questioned results, she provided misleading data. Result? Complete destruction. 2015 Wall Street Journal investigation exposes the fraud. 2016 federal investigations begin. 2018 company shuts down completely. 2022 Elizabeth Holmes convicted of fraud. $9 billion in value evaporated. But here's the tragedy: if Holmes had admitted early that the technology wasn't ready, she could have pivoted. Investors might have supported continued development. The core idea wasn't necessarily bad, the execution wasn't there yet. But her delicacy of honor, her inability to say, "We haven't solved this yet," led to covering up problems, which led to fraud, which led to complete destruction. This is what Sun Tzu means by sensitive to shame. Holmes couldn't tolerate the shame of admitting the technology didn't work, so she hid the truth, which made everything worse. Sun Tzu says this fault leads to what? Not destruction like recklessness, not capture like cowardice. It leads to a different kind of failure, loss of all credibility. Once discovered, no one will trust you again. Holmes will forever be associated with fraud. Her name is synonymous with startup dishonesty. That's the cost of excessive sensitivity to shame. How do you know if you have this fault? 3 symptoms. 1. You have difficulty admitting mistakes. Even small errors feel like attacks on your identity. 2. You care deeply about how others perceive you, not just professional. Reputation, personal image, and status. 3. You'd rather hide problems than solve them. If no one knows about the problem, it doesn't hurt your image. If this describes you, Sun Tzu doesn't offer a direct solution in Chapter 8. But the remedy is implied in verse 7, blend advantages and disadvantages. Admitting error has short-term disadvantage, shame, but long-term advantage, credibility, trust, ability to fix problems. The honor-delicate person only sees the disadvantage. 5th fault, over-solicitude for his men, which exposes him to worry and trouble. This is the most misunderstood fault. People think Sun Tzu is saying, don't care about your people. That's not it at all. Solicitude means excessive concern or worry. Over-solicitude means you care so much about avoiding discomfort for your team that you fail to make necessary hard decisions. The over-solicitous leader says, I can't lay anyone off. These people have families. I can't give critical feedback. I don't want to hurt their feelings. I can't make them work harder. They're already stressed. All of these concerns are valid, but when they prevent you from taking necessary action, they become a fault. Perfect example, Quibi, 2020. Quibi raised $175 billion to create a mobile-first streaming service. Jeffrey Katzenberg, founder, and Meg Whitman, CEO, were legendary executives. The company had every advantage, but from the beginning, there were problems. The product wasn't resonating. User retention was terrible. The mobile-only format wasn't working. But Katzenberg and Whitman were over-solicitous. They'd raised all this money. They'd hired hundreds of people. They'd made commitments to content creators. They couldn't bring themselves to make hard pivots. What about all the people we hired? What about the content creators who built shows for us? What about investors who trusted us? Result? They kept going in the wrong direction for 8 months. Burned through most of the $175 billion. Then shut down completely. Over-solicitude didn't save anyone. It destroyed the company and hurt all the people they were trying to protect. Everyone lost their jobs anyway. Sun Tzu's point, over-solicitude, exposes you to worry and trouble. Not your team, you. The over-solicitous leader suffers the most. They can't sleep because they're worried about everyone. They can't make decisions because they're paralyzed by concern. They can't take necessary action because they're emotionally overwhelmed. And ironically, this hurts their people more than decisive action would have. If Quibi had pivoted quickly, even if it meant layoff, some version of the company might have survived. Instead, 100% of people lost jobs when the company folded. How do you know if you have this fault? 3 symptoms. 1. You lose sleep over people decisions. Not just big layoffs, even performance reviews keep you up at night. 2. Your team doesn't respect your decisions. They see you as nice but weak. They know they can push back and you'll fold. 3. You avoid necessary confrontations. Problems fester because you can't bring yourself to address them directly. If this describes you, Sun Tzu's solution is brutal. But clear, understand that over-solicitude doesn't help your people. It hurts them. True care for your team means making hard decisions that serve long-term success, even when they create short-term discomfort. Now we see how it all connects. Chapter 8, verse 13-14, these are the 5 besetting sins of a general, ruinous to the conduct of war. When an army is overthrown and its leader slain, the cause will surely be found among these 5 dangerous faults. Let them be a subject of meditation. Sun Tzu isn't just listing these faults. He's saying when you fail as a leader, the cause will surely be found among these 5. Not market conditions, not competition, not bad luck, your personality faults. This is radical personal responsibility. Sun Tzu is saying the problem is you, your recklessness, your cowardice, your hasty temper, your delicacy of honor, your over-solicitude. So which fault is yours? Most leaders have one dominant fault with 1 or 2 secondary faults. Take a moment right now, based on what we've discussed. Recklessness. Do you move too fast without preparation? Cowardice. Do you see opportunities but fail to act? Hasty temper. Do emotions control your decisions? Delicacy of honor. Are you too sensitive to criticism or shame? Awana over-solicitude. Do you avoid hard decisions to protect others' feelings? Sun Tzu says these should be a subject of meditation, not a one-time assessment, ongoing self-examination. Because here's the thing, these faults don't just cause one failure. They create patterns of failure. Until you see your pattern, you're doomed to repeat it. Now we face the darkness. What happens when these faults destroy you? At the personal level, stagnant skills. Reduce your market value by 50% over 5 years. That creates an annual income gap that compounds ruthlessly. We're talking $23,000 per year that becomes $230,000 over a decade. Just gone. At the organizational level, market share erodes by 12% annually. Top talent exits at 68% higher rates. Shareholder value destruction reaches 47% over 5 years. But the most devastating cost isn't financial. It's what I call strategic death. You're still alive. Still operating, but strategically irrelevant. Kodak invented digital photography in 1975. Think about that. They created the very technology that would define the future of their industry, but they couldn't abandon their profitable film business. Which fault? A combination cowardice, fear of disrupting existing revenue, and over-solicitude protecting film division employees. Result? Revenue collapsed from $19 billion to $2 billion. Workforce shrank from 140,000 to 8,000. A 132-year-old company filed for bankruptcy in 2012. They didn't lack technology. They didn't lack resources. They lack the ability to follow Sun Tzu's teaching from chapter 8, verse 3. Sometimes there are positions which must not be contested. The film business was a position that must not be contested forever. Digital was coming. The wise move was to abandon film proactively. But fault-driven decision-making kept them in a position they couldn't defend. This is the pattern across all failed companies. Blockbuster cowardice couldn't commit to digital transformation. Yahoo! Cowardice couldn't make bold acquisitions. Nokia delicacy of honor couldn't admit they'd missed smartphones. Wells Fargo recklessness, no guardrails on growth. Quibi over-solicitude couldn't make hard pivots. Every single failure traces back to the 5 dangerous faults. Sun Tzu was right 2,500 years ago. He's still right today. This is your dark night of the soul, a moment that demands brutal honesty. What changes have you been avoiding? What signals are you deliberately ignoring? What position are you defending that should be abandoned? Most importantly, which of the 5 dangerous faults describes you? Because here's the brutal truth. The most dangerous enemy isn't your competitor. It's the voice inside your head that says everything is fine when it's not. It's your recklessness saying, we need to move faster, when you need preparation. It's your cowardice saying, let's wait for more data when you need to act. It's your hasty temper reacting emotionally when you need strategy. It's your delicacy of honor hiding problems when you need transparency. It's your over-solicitude avoiding hard decisions when you need clarity. Sun Tzu ends the 5 faults section with verse 14. Let them be a subject of meditation, not just acknowledgement. Meditation, deep, ongoing self-examination. So let me ask you directly, when did you last make a decision driven by recklessness? By cowardice? By hasty temper? By sensitivity to shame? By excessive concern for others' comfort? Can you see the pattern? Because until you see it, you can't break it. But here's the hidden truth in this darkness. This moment of recognition is actually your greatest opportunity. Why? Because self-awareness is the first step to correction. And correction is possible. Sun Tzu wouldn't list these faults if they were inevitable. The fact that he teaches them means they can be overcome. Every company that survived and thrived didn't wait for perfect conditions. They created their own through strategic adaptation guided by awareness of their faults. The dawn is coming. Are you ready to meet it? From darkness comes clarity. Now it's time to build your personal 9 changes. System not just theory, but a battle-tested framework. This system integrates 2,500 years of strategic wisdom with modern research validation. 3 distinct phases for transformation. But first, let's understand what makes this system different. Most strategic frameworks tell you what to do. The 9 changes system tells you 1. What not to do, 5 prohibitions. 2. Why you'll do it anyway, 5 faults. 3. How to adapt without losing direction, variation of tactics. 4. When to refuse even good advice, commands not to obey. 5. How to prepare your position before you need it, unassailable position. Phase 1 takes 1 week. It's diagnostic and positioning. Day 1-2, the 5 faults assessment. Create your personal fault profile using this framework. For each fault, rate yourself 1 to 10, 10 severe. Recklessness. Do I act before preparing adequately? Cowardice. Do I see opportunities but fail to act? Hasty temper. Do emotions drive my decisions? Delicacy of honor. Am I too sensitive to criticism? Over-solicitude. Do I avoid necessary hard decisions? Your highest score is your dominant fault. Your second highest is your secondary fault. These are your blind spots. Day 3-4, the do not do audit. Apply the 5 prohibitions to your current situation. 1. What roads am I following that should not be followed? Markets, strategies, approaches. 2. What positions am I contesting that should not be contested? Battles against stronger competitors. 3. What commands am I obeying that should not be obeyed? Organizational momentum, conventional wisdom. 4. What armies am I attacking that should not be attacked? Competitors too strong in their domains. 5. What towns am I besieging that should not be besieged? Customers, deals, initiatives costing more than they're worth. Write specific examples for each. Be brutally honest. Day 5-7, advantage-disadvantage analysis. For each major decision or strategy, practice. Sun Tzu's blended thinking from verse 7. What are immediate advantages? What are hidden disadvantages? What are immediate disadvantages? Nkwano, what are hidden advantages? How do these blend over time? This trains you to see the full strategic picture, not just comfortable parts. Phase 2 is 30 days of systematic practice. Week 1, decision SLA service level agreement. Establish time-bound decision protocols based on Sun Tzu's teaching that preparation enables speed. Strategic decisions market entry, major pivots, 72 hours maximum. Not decide in 72 hours, but gather necessary information and decide within 72 hours. If you can't decide in 72 hours, the information doesn't exist. Act on what you have. Tactical decisions, product features, hiring, partnerships. 24 hours maximum. Tactical decisions delayed become strategic failures. 24 hours forces you to distinguish essential from nice-to-have information. Operational decisions, daily execution, resource allocation, 4 hours maximum. Operational speed compounds into tactical advantage. 4 hours prevents overthinking routine decisions. Track every major decision against these SLAs. Note when you hit them and when you don't. Week 2-3, weekly variation review. Every Monday, conduct a variation review inspired by Chapter 8, Verse 4. Ask 3 questions. 1. What changed last week? Market, competition, customer needs, internal capabilities. 2. What tactics should vary in response? Not strategy tactics. 3. What must remain constant? Strategic direction, core values, unassailable positions. This creates systematic tactical flexibility within strategic stability. Week 4, the preparation audit. Apply verse 11. Rely not on the likelihood of the enemy's not coming, but on our own readiness to receive him. For each major risk or opportunity. If this happened next week, am I ready? If not, what preparation makes my position unassailable? What resources, systems, or capabilities do I need? Don't wait for the crisis to prepare. Zoom prepared for 9 years before COVID. When are you preparing for? Phase 3 is ongoing the rest of your career. Quarterly strategic audit. Every quarter, full assessment. 1. 5 prohibitions review. Am I violating any of the prohibitions? Have I started following roads I shouldn't? Contesting positions I shouldn't? 2. 5 faults check. Which fault dominated my decisions this quarter? Did my dominant fault cause any failures? 3. Advantage-disadvantage recalibration for major strategies. Have advantages and disadvantages shifted? What looks different now than 90 days ago? 4. Variation effectiveness. Did my tactical variations serve strategic goals? Or did I vary strategy when I should have varied tactics? Monthly meditation practice. Sun Tzu says the 5 faults should be a subject of meditation, not once continuously. Monthly practice. 15 minutes of reflection. When did I exhibit each fault this month? Pattern recognition. Is one fault becoming dominant? Correction planning. What specific behaviors will I change next month? This isn't abstract philosophy. It's practical self-correction based on observable behavior. The Anti-Fault Network. Build a personal board of advisors, people who will call out your faults. Someone to check recklessness. Have we prepared adequately? Someone to check cowardice. What opportunity are we missing? Someone to check hasty temper. Are we reacting emotionally? Someone to check delicacy of honor. Can we admit this isn't working? Accompany. Someone to check over-solicitude. What hard decision are we avoiding? You can't see your own blind spots. You need others to point them out. Now let's make this even more practical. 3 tools you can implement immediately. Tool number 1, the prohibition card. Create a physical card you carry everywhere. On it, write Sun Tzu's 5 prohibitions. There are roads which must not be followed, armies, which must not be attacked, towns which must not be besieged, positions which must not be contested, commands of the sovereign which must not be obeyed. Before any major decision, pull out the card. Ask, am I violating one of these? Tool number 2, the 777 protocol. For important decisions, force yourself to see advantages and disadvantages. 7 advantages, including hidden long-term advantages. 7 disadvantages, including hidden long-term disadvantages. 7 variations, alternative approaches, tactical pivots. If you can't list 7 of each, you don't understand the decision well enough. Tool number 3, the fault trigger journal. Keep a journal of when each fault gets triggered. Recklessness triggered when I see competitors moving fast. Cowardice triggered when I imagine potential negative outcomes. Hasty temper triggered when someone questions my judgment. Delicacy of honor triggered when I have to admit I was wrong. Over-solicitude triggered when I have to deliver bad news. Once you know your triggers, you can interrupt the pattern. Real-world application examples. Let me show you how this works in practice. Example 1, the road not followed. A tech startup gets approached by a major enterprise client. The deal would 10x their revenue immediately. But the enterprise client wants heavy customization that would derail their product roadmap. Without the 9 changes framework, they'd probably take the deal. It's revenue, it's validation, it's a road that's available. With the framework, they ask, is this a road which must not be followed? Analysis, VIII. Advantage, immediate revenue, enterprise credibility. Disadvantage derails product vision, creates dependency on one client, pulls away from core market. Verdict, this is a road which must not be followed. They refuse the deal. Stay focused on their product roadmap. 2 years later, they're serving hundreds of clients instead of being dependent on one. Example 2, the command not obeyed. A marketing director's CEO demands they focus entirely on paid advertising. That's what everyone's doing. That's where the ROI is. Without the framework, the director obeys. It's the CEO's command. With the framework, they recognize this is a command of the sovereign, which must not be obeyed. Why? The director has battlefield information. The CEO doesn't. Their audience responds better to content marketing. Their competitors are all doing paid advertising. It's a contested position. The unit economics don't work for their customer lifetime value. The director respectfully refuses, presents the data, and proposes an alternative. The CEO, seeing the analysis, agrees. The company saves millions on ineffective paid advertising. Now you see how every element of Chapter 8 integrates. Foundation blended thinking, verse 7. See advantages and disadvantages. This creates strategic clarity. Application 5 prohibitions, verse 3. Know what not to do. This creates strategic selectivity. Understanding 5 faults, verse 12-14. You know why you'll violate your own wisdom. This creates self-awareness. Execution variation of tactics, verse 4. Adapt tactics while maintaining strategy. This creates flexibility without chaos. Preparation, unassailable position, verse 11. Prepare before you need it. This creates readiness for any circumstance. Each element supports the others. You can't practice one without the others. This is a complete system. How do you know if the 9 changes system is working? Short-term metrics, 30 days. Decision speed, are you hitting your decision SLAs? Fault awareness. Can you identify which fault drove each major decision? Army, variation practice. Did you conduct weekly variation reviews? Medium-term metrics, 90 days. Avoided failures. Did you refuse to follow roads you shouldn't follow? Tactical adaptations. Did you vary tactics in response to changing circumstances? Strategic consistency. Did your strategic direction remain stable? Long-term metrics, 1 year. 1 year. Competitive position. Are you creating unassailable positions in advance of need? Leadership effectiveness. Are your decisions driven by strategy rather than faults? Organizational culture. Is your team practicing blended thinking and tactical variation? As you implement this system, avoid these common mistakes. Mistake number 1, confusing tactics with strategy. Don't vary strategic direction frequently. Do vary tactical approach constantly. Mistake number 2, using prohibitions as excuses. Don't say it's too hard and call it wisdom. Do distinguish between hard but necessary and hard and wrong. Mistake number 3, over-focusing on faults. Don't become paralyzed by self-criticism. Do use fault awareness to interrupt negative patterns. Mistake number 4, seeking balance instead of adaptability. Don't try to be medium boldness all the time. Do be extremely bold sometimes, extremely cautious sometimes, based on context. Mistake number 5, implementing without diagnosis. Don't just start varying tactics randomly. Do complete the Foundation Week diagnostic first. We've covered 2,500 years of strategic wisdom in 60 minutes. But knowledge without action is useless. So here are your next immediate steps. Today, next 24 hours. 1. Complete your 5 faults assessment. 2. Identify your dominant fault. 3. Choose one decision you're facing and apply the 7-7-7 protocol. This week, next 7 days. 4. Complete the Do Not Do audit. 5. Create your prohibition card. 6. Conduct your first weekly variation review. This month, next 30 days. 7. Establish your decision SLAs. 8. Build your anti-fault network. 9. Start your fault trigger journal. This quarter, next 90 days. 10. Conduct your first quarterly strategic audit. 11. Identify one road not followed and commit to avoiding it. 12. Identify one unassailable position and begin building it. But here's the final challenge. The hardest part isn't understanding the 9 changes. You understand it now. The hardest part is applying it when your faults are screaming at you. When your recklessness says move now, you must pause and prepare. When your cowardice says wait for more data, you must act with what you have. When your hasty temper says react strongly, you must respond strategically. When your delicacy of honor says hide the problem, you must admit the truth. When your over-solicitude says protect everyone's feelings, you must make the hard call. This is the daily practice of the 9 changes. It never gets easy, but it gets more natural. Remember how we started? There are roads which must not be followed, armies which must not be attacked, towns which must not be besieged, positions which must not be contested, commands of the sovereign which must not be obeyed. Sun Tzu chapter 8 verse 3, 5 categories of what not to do. But now you understand this isn't about weakness or avoidance. It's about strategic selectivity. It's about fighting the battles you can win, rather than the battles you're expected to fight. Eric Yuan refused to attack competitors where they were strong. Southwest Airlines refused to follow the hub and spoke road. Nintendo refused to contest the hardcore gamer position. Andy Grove refused to obey the implicit command to stay in memory. They all practiced the 9 changes. They varied tactics while maintaining strategic direction. They built unassailable positions before circumstances demanded them. They saw advantages and disadvantages. They knew their faults and compensated for them. And here's the ultimate lesson Sun Tzu teaches in chapter 8. Adaptability itself is your greatest competitive advantage. Not your product that can be copied. Not your market position that can be challenged. Not your resources, those can be matched. But your ability to change course when the ground shifts beneath you. Your ability to see what must not be done before everyone else. Your awareness of your own faults before they destroy you. That cannot be copied. That can only be cultivated through daily practice of the 9 changes. So I challenge you, don't just watch this video and move on. Take action today. Complete your 5 faults assessment. Create your prohibition card. Choose one decision and apply blended thinking. Because here's the truth, the world doesn't need more. People who know Sun Tzu's wisdom. It needs people who live it. Will you be one of them? The general who thoroughly understands the advantages that accompany variation of tactics, knows how to handle his troops. Do you understand? Now go practice.